All right, everybody, we welcome you in live. Happy Saturday, Ohio State, the Ohio Bobcats. Week 3 of the college football season is officially here, and we're excited to bring you our Buckeye pregame preview. Already the third game of the season for the Buckeyes. It's kind of hard to believe, but this is their final, not their final, but their final game before the bye week. Already a bye week coming up. A week from today, we will not be talking about the Buckeyes on a Saturday, but Ohio State looking to improve to 3-0 before heading into the bye week, of course, and the only thing standing between that and them accomplishing that is, of course, the Ohio Bobcats. Obviously, in a matchup like this, Ohio State heavily favored, as they should be. So much is made about these type of matchups, especially on my end. I'm not a big fan of these types of matchups just because, like, we are so we know Ohio State being a fan, it's being a part of a cult. You know, we're going to spend big dollars on tickets. We're going to drop what we're doing to make sure that we are free to watch the Ohio State Buckeyes just pummel a team by 40. But that's how much we love our Ohio State Buckeyes. But imagine if every week was like that Texas week. How cool would that be? But the one unique thing about this is Ohio State is going to be, of course, taking on the Bobcats here at night at the Shoe. Okay, and I think we've seen Akron and we've seen a lot of MAC teams in recent years play Western Michigan. We've seen a lot of MAC teams play Ohio State at the Shoe at night. And that's always been my big complaint and my big joke that, if there's one conference that has benefited more from Ohio State getting so many noon kickoffs, it is the MAC. I mean, Big Ten benefits greatly because of the big TV deal that they got with Fox, of course. But they definitely use Ohio State for a lot of those big noon kickoffs, no doubt about it. But when Ohio State, when they don't have a big game, that's when it seems like ESPN or whoever else gets the scraps. And that's what's happening here tonight, of course, with Ohio State taking on Ohio for the 7 o'clock kickoff at the Shoe. That's a game right there that's going to be on Peacock, exclusively on Peacock. So that network, they get Ohio State. They're going to get a lot of Buckeye eyes, Ohio University eyes on this game tonight. But the bottom line is no conference has benefited more from the big noon kickoff outside of the Big Ten than the MAC because of so many schools getting to play night games at the Shoe. And that may be, that may sound conceited as a Buckeye fan, but that's just the reality of it. But again, we welcome you in live here. It's our Buckeye pregame preview as the Buckeyes get set to take on the Bobcats. The first night game of the season, Ohio State's got to experience a little bit of everything. Although all their games have been at home, they kicked off the season with the big noon kickoff against at the time, the number one team in the country, Texas. Then a 3:30 kickoff last week in a game that I was at with Grambling. And then they have, of course, the night game tonight, of course, with the Ohio Bobcats. So that's all coming up here in a little bit. Every week on my show, we have a chance to catch up with the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels. So you'll have a chance to catch that interview if you didn't get to catch it on my show earlier in the week. So we'll have that here shortly. But I will say, because final opinion on this, they're doing the stripe out, the helmet stripe game. Okay. And every section has a designated, instruction as far as what you're supposed to wear in that particular section. Okay. And I think this is cool. I love when they do these theme type of nights or whatever, but like night games are supposed to be for the prime time, the Texases, the Penn States, the heavy hitters. Ohio State's going to take on Illinois in a few weeks in what could be a top 10 showdown. If that is the case, if that truly is the case, I mean, that should be a game that's under the lights in Champaign, but it's going to probably be at noon. And that's the unfortunate part, is so many of these bigger games are being moved to noon. Does it make the game less big? No. Does it make the winning teams win less impressive? No. But from an atmosphere standpoint, from a fan experience standpoint, I don't think fans were disappointed in their experience at the Shoe week 1 against Texas. But imagine that game under the lights. How electric was that atmosphere for a noon kickoff? Imagine what it is when those lights kick on. And the Shoe's going to be a great environment tonight with the Bobcats in town, no doubt about it. But can you imagine, instead of having to play the Bobcats tonight, if you got Penn State at night, if you got Texas at night, nonetheless. But I will put a positive spin on it. Okay. I remember a few years ago when Ohio State welcomed in Akron, and I talked about this on my show earlier this week. Especially when I was in college, I didn't have the money to be able to afford to go buy tickets to watch the Buckeyes at the Shoe at night. That was just not going to happen. Anytime the Buckeyes played at night, it was always against a primetime opponent, a primetime worthy opponent. They were playing the Penn States or the Michigan States, you know what I mean? Or any kind of top 25 showdown opponent that was worthy. You didn't play, non-top 25 or non-big games at night. You just didn't. All the big games were at night. That was an Urban Meyer thing. He loved to play all those big games at night. And I was always a big fan of that. but I was never able to afford to go to games like that. Those ticket prices, I mean, the Ohio State Texas game, those tickets were going for thousands of dollars. Even outside, CDEC was going for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, like $500, $600, $700. And that was for a noon kick. I promise you, just by popping those lights on at night and playing that game at night, the tickets, every single ticket that was sold for that game would have got more money for those tickets had that game been at night. That's just how it goes. So from that aspect, never being able to experience the shoe at night before, there is a positive spin on it. When you are playing opponents like this, it has made the Texas game at night. Tickets are supposed to be way more expensive. It's still an expensive ticket, don't get me wrong, but it's much more affordable. If you've never been to the shoe at night, it is an experience. It's just it's surreal how cool it is. And to Ross Bjork, the athletic director's credit, they've done a much better job of really focusing in on the game day experience and enhancing that. And you're going to see that tonight with the helmet stripe game. I think that's going to be a fun way to get the fans involved in a game that they probably wouldn't be too much interested in after the first quarter, of course. Now, as we sit here right now, Ohio State, they are a 28.5-point favorite. That line is actually shifted, which is wild. It was like a 31.5-point line to start the week. It's sitting at 28.5 right now as Ohio, the Bobcats are in town. So the number one Buckeyes, the Ohio Bobcats, the final non-conference showdown for your Ohio State Buckeyes before they head into the bye week. And then coming out of the bye week, they'll have the Washington Huskies, and that's going to be a game that's on the road. It'll be the Buckeyes' first road game of the 2025 season. But the defending national champions, currently the number one team in the country, currently 2-0, looking to go 3-0 with the Bobcats here in town. I'm Justin Kenner with you here. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you like the show if you're watching, whether it's on Hot 1029's Facebook page, 92.9 Jack FM, 101.5 Hank FM, whatever Facebook page you're watching this on, please give it a like. We're trying to help grow our pregame coverage shows here like this, and it helps when you get that like. It helps with the algorithm, so please give that a little thumbs up at the bottom if you don't mind. That definitely helps us, no doubt about it. Okay. So again, I'm Justin Kenner. I host the Justin Kenner Show weekdays from 3 to 5 on 1410 ESPN Radio. Every Thursday, the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, he kicks off the show with us, and we recap the previous week's game, and we preview the upcoming game. And of course, we had a chance to recap what was a tough game to take anything away when you talk about, the 70-0 win over Grambling State this past Saturday. Also tough to really put a preview tone on a matchup where Ohio State's this game's done before it even starts, right? I'm probably being a little disrespectful to Ohio at this point, but we all know the reality of why these teams are put on the schedule. All right. I call these buffer games. This is the final buffer game before you head into Big Ten play. And Ohio State gets to do that at home, at night, at the shoe with the Bobcats in town. If you missed our conversation with Paul Keels earlier in the week, we have it for you right here. Here's the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, as we, of course, discuss all things Ohio State, Ohio, the Big Ten. Check it out. It's now to kick off the show like he does each and every Thursday throughout the Buckeye season. The one, the only Mr. Paul Keels. Paul Keels, welcome in, sir. How are you? How was your weekend?
I'm like you. I've broken up with the Reds a few times, but I've stayed with them.
I mean, I have no problem admitting that. I know a lot of hosts want to pretend like, oh, no, I haven't given up the whole time. I'm like, no, I'll tell you when I'm breaking up with them. I might break up with them after tomorrow night if they lose game one against the A's. You never know. So
yeah, no, but the weekend was good. Hopefully yours was too.
It was. I got a chance, to go to watch the game against Grambling State. Of course, the shoe always an experience. The game was an experience early, but that's how we expected it to go. It's how you expected it to go. What were some of your takeaways? I know it's kind of hard in a game like that, but what are some of your big takeaways from that Buckeye win this past Saturday?
Well, starting fast offensively, which is, coaches always talk about that, but being able to do it against a team that you're overmatching, being able to do that, being able to defensively still play at a high level, not letting any big plays out the gate, and also to play a lot of players, see them get a defensive score, see them get turnovers, do the kind of things that you want to see a football team do. But, Justin, what we've really heard, and Ryan Day has adapted this the last few years, one of his favorite phrases now is the issues are still there, meaning they still need to improve. Coaches are always going to look at areas they need to improve on, and he certainly focuses on that like many other coaches do. He's not alone. But, they were able to play a lot of players, which is a good thing, and build some momentum.
Obviously, you get a lot of time with Ryan Day through the coaches' interviews and just media availability when that time comes. Is this a different Ryan Day? I mean, he has to be, right? Obviously shaking off a lot of criticism from last year to win a championship, but how different is this Ryan Day? I know we're only 2 weeks in. I was listening to the coaches' show earlier. He just seems like a much different coach in a good way, obviously. How different is he in your opinion?
Well, I think, obviously winning a national championship certainly gets a certain sizable monkey off your back and off the program's back too. But, it gives him the kind of ammunition to continue to preach those things about getting better, what they need to address. His focus remains sharp, but he does it without, becoming a tyrant out there. He does it without changing his personality. He's still able to, some of the things that he'll talk to us off the air about, be able to, inject a little fun and a little levity into a few moments of practice and things like that. But, I think what he's also done too is really worked hard at establishing the message being the same through the whole coaching staff to the players. And that's something I think that's been a neat thing to see as we've watched him grow into the head coach that he's become.
Voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, with us here on the Justin Kinder Show. 2-0, obviously, two very different style of games in Texas and Grambling, and now you turn your attention towards a very competitive team out of the MAC. I mean, they've kind of Ohio, the Bobcats have had an interesting start. Obviously, played very competitive against a Power 4 opponent in Rutgers, and then they beat a Power 4 opponent in West Virginia a week later. This is a team that's coming in with a lot of confidence. I'm not going to do the whole, Ohio State better look out. They could beat them, but at the same time, if they, you come in a little mentally not prepared, Ohio can make things difficult on Saturday.
Well, and those of us here in this state know about the MAC and know how competitive the conference is amongst one another and how teams can pull off big upsets. But, this is a program really that's been on an upward trend. You go back to the foundation set by Frank Solich. Now it's been continued through Tim Albin and now with Brian Smith. And certainly it seems the continuity from the coaching change from Tim Albin to Brian Smith has continued what got them to win the MAC last year, a returning experienced quarterback. When you look really at what Parker Navarro has done, he's a dual threat that can hurt you both ways. Chase Hendricks looks like an outstanding wide receiver. The interesting thing about Ohio University, they've got, I'm going to say 3 or 4 guys, I'd have to look at my chart, who left to the transfer portal and then came back. Their starting running back, C.A. Bangura, went to Minnesota, but then came back to the Bobcats. So guys that obviously felt a comfort factor with the program, comfort factor with the school, but also guys that have been able to come and contribute. So it's a program that certainly has done good things at their level in the Mid-American Conference. And plus, when you always know when in-state opponents are on Ohio State's schedule, they're going to be excited about playing in the Horseshoe. They're going to be excited about the opportunity, and nothing can be taken for granted.
Yeah, and a chance to play in the shoe, at night. Obviously, the noon kickoff week 1, a 3:30 kickoff last Saturday, and then a night game coming up this weekend. 3 straight home games for Ohio State to kick off the season before the bye week. And I heard you ask this to Coach Day on the Coaches Show earlier today about, how much that kind of helps them just kind of get into a routine a bit now that we're heading into week 3. But 3 straight home games, all at different times. That may not be a huge thing, but how much of an impact is that, again, getting to experience different kickoff times after we make so much about big noon kickoffs?
Well, and, I was thinking back to it, Justin, earlier today. I believe this is the 4th straight year that they've had a Mid-American opponent at home at night. I know it was Western Michigan last year and the 2 years before, I believe, Toledo and Akron at different years. It just allows them to work on a routine, but being at home has a lot to do with it. Ryan's talked about how that first week is a little bit different because you're coming from camp to the first week, and also all of the focus that was on Texas. It probably also helps acclimate with school starting as well as getting that change in routine going. But it's a matter, especially with new players and new coaches, in particular in the coordinator. Well, one in particular in the coordinator position who's new to the program. Just being able to get familiar with where they have to be, where they have to go, all of those kind of things that maybe gets taken for granted. But having 3 at home is good. It allows guys to be around their family. It allows them to sleep in their own beds. Their first trip away is going to be all the way across the country. So that'll be another adjustment they have to make. But it's been a good thing. And, having 2 teams, at least one team anyway, you're not assuming anything was going to happen this Saturday. But, having games where you think that they've got a better than decent chance of making things go well.
Julian saying, obviously, just 2 games into his career, seen a lot of good, obviously, and Obviously, what are you expecting from him as we look to continue to see that progression and him just continue to get better as the season goes on? Obviously, his next real test will be Washington, but next real test is technically in the game that's next up on the schedule, of course. What did you see from him progression-wise and just growth from 1 week to the next?
Continue to look comfortable. He got out there and was able to, find his receiver, spread the ball around, didn't seem to be flustered. Got great protection for the offensive line. They've not allowed a sack at this point. They've only allowed 2 tackles for loss. His accuracy certainly has been on point. We're starting to see more of what people have talked about with his quick release. And some of the other offensive players have been interviewed has talked about how he's become more in command in the huddle and on the field. So it just, to a layperson watching it from way up where we are, it just seems that there's quite a comfort factor that's developing.
Penn State's another Big Ten team that's just gotten a lot of love in the offseason, and rightfully so. We know what they bring back, so they're getting a lot of attention. Obviously, Michigan coming off that loss against Oklahoma and playing in primetime, so they're getting a lot of attention. Ohio State with the big win over Texas. The team that just seems to be kind of hiding in the weeds a little bit that just absolutely demolished Power 4 opponent over the weekend is Oregon. Oregon's they're just kind of sitting there silently right now, just kind of watching as everyone else gets that attention. How impressed have you been with Oregon just a few weeks in?
Very impressive when you consider what they did against Oklahoma State. And, Oregon, because they're not on Ohio State's schedule, was, a team that you didn't pay that much attention to, but you also didn't know what they were going to be like with Dante Moore at quarterback, replacing Dylan Gabriel. So, but they had enough of the other parts of a team that won the Big Ten last year. So, but what they've done has been impressive. I know that Oklahoma State's in a little bit of a down cycle and all of that, but certainly what they've done has been impressive. And it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I think everybody's kind of anticipating that Oregon-Penn State game in State College, how those two teams are going to match up with one another and, how that is going to affect what happens in the Big Ten, how that will affect Penn State coming to Columbus to play Ohio State a little later on. But, yeah, Oregon, maybe they were forgotten about when the season started, but they're showing that they shouldn't be.
Illinois, another team that we're all kind of keeping our eye on, as that could be another, the next big top 25, potential top 10 showdown with Ohio State when that comes in mid-October, of course, which seems off in the distance, but with the way that these seasons fly by, it'll be here before you know it. But Illinois, a big win over Duke this past weekend on the road.
Yeah, on the road against a Duke team. I believe Duke won 9 games last year, Justin. So, you shouldn't sneeze at that. And, maybe most impressive, a lot of reason that folks liked what Illinois potentially was going to do, bringing back a returning quarterback and Luke Altmaier. I believe they brought back their entire offensive line, but they got 5 turnovers in that game defensively. So Brett Bielema hasn't been playing the kind of football that they did when he was at Wisconsin. And that's going to make for an interesting matchup when Ohio State goes there. You realize Ryan Day has yet to coach a game against Illinois. They've just been off the schedule. The game of the pandemic was canceled. So that's going to be an interesting twist, Ryan Day coaching Ohio State against Illinois for the first time ever.
Yeah, and on top of that, on the road. And that atmosphere.
On the road,
a 9 a.m. kick, a noon kick, a 2 a.m. kick, an 8 p.m. It doesn't matter. That place will be just absolutely jacked waiting for the Buckeyes' arrival. But a lot of football will have to be played between now and then. Obviously, the bye week coming up after this. I'm sure you don't mind a Saturday off from time to time with how busy your schedule starts ramping up all the way into basketball after this. But what's it like having an early, a bye week just seem to, you get this momentum going and then all of a sudden, boom, you come to a screeching halt with the early bye week?
Well, it's I guess you never know how it's going to work out. I think we talked about originally the bye was going to be last week, but that got changed when UConn dropped off and Grambling was added. But it's kind of nice. If I could choose, I would probably make it in the midst of October. There's a second bye coming in October, but there's basketball during that bye. So, those things supposedly, we're told by the Big Ten Conference, are computer generated. This is another year where there's 2 byes because of the extra Saturday between Labor Day and Thanksgiving. So, but, you just have to deal with it. I think last year they had the bye after they went to Oregon. This year, the bye before going to Washington. I guess it's up to these coaches and the staff on these football teams to make the most of it and make it work the best as you possibly can.
All right, good stuff. You'll hear Paul Keels, a legendary voice of the Buckeyes on the call, coming up this Saturday night, 7 o'clock to kickoff. We'll have pregame coverage beginning for you right here at 5:30 on Dayton's radio, home of the Buckeyes, 1410 ESPN Radio, and then our sister station, 92.9 Jack FM. Paul, thank you as always for your time. I know you're busy, especially, right now we're off and rolling, but thank you so much, and we look forward to talking to you later on.
My pleasure, Justin. Talk to you next week.
All right, good stuff. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Fricker. All right. Again, that was from earlier this week. Every Thursday, the voice of the Buckeyes, Paul Keels, jumps on with us, which we always look forward to. So there you have it. You're going to hear Paul Keels on the call coming up here just around the corner. 92.9 Jack FM, 1410 ESPN Radio, Dayton's radio home for Ohio State football. All right. So with that being said, before we go here again, Ohio State and the Bobcats, excuse me, Ohio State and the Bobcats getting set to kick off coming up here at 7 o'clock. Pregame coverage begins at 14, pregame coverage begins at 5:30 on 1410 ESPN Radio, and of course, 92.9 Jack FM, as we've talked about. Before we go, though, take a look as we share our screen here again, just taking a look kind of at what's going on right now around the rest of the world in college football. The bottom line is Ohio State and the Bobcats, not the sexiest matchup of the afternoon or of the evening, if you will. No doubt about it. So with that being said, for those watching live on our pregame previews on social media, go ahead and take a look right here. Here's kind of what's coming up for the rest of the afternoon and evening for college football, of course. Oregon and Northwestern, that's a game that's kicked off at noon. Clemson and Georgia Tech right there. Clemson, a 2.5-point favorite. They're on the road at undefeated Georgia Tech at this point. Clemson, of course, having that tough week 1 loss that they had to kind of unfortunately set the tone for their season. They're looking to continue to win and be one of the top teams coming out of the ACC. So we'll keep an eye on that matchup right there. Oklahoma, the big win that they had over Michigan last week. They're a 23.5-point favorite on the road as they play at Temple. I saw this interesting. Alabama, the number 19 team in the country, welcoming in Wisconsin. This is in Tuscaloosa. This is the Big Ten against the SEC, right? You can get tickets if you're in that area for as low as $9. Yesterday was $15. The tickets are dropping. Like, Alabama football is taking a major hit. That is something to keep an eye on moving forward. Wisconsin, and I got to say, I've predicted for a while that Luke Fickell, head coach at Wisconsin, who I really wish it would have worked out there. I just don't think that it is. I think he's going to end up back at Cincinnati. I don't think that Cincinnati's going to continue on with Satterfield, and I don't think, once Wisconsin finishes this season, if they're not even sniffing the playoffs or the Big Ten championship game, I don't see how they're going to be very thrilled with Luke Fickell's tenure, at Madison. So with that being said, this is an opportunity, though, for Luke Fickell to get a staple win. He doesn't have a staple win in his time at Wisconsin. So this would be an opportunity on the road, a top 25 opponent at Alabama. Alabama is a 20.5-point favorite. Keep an eye on this matchup. I think that this game has a lot of ramifications. Alabama needs a win to kind of shake off that embarrassing week 1 loss that they had, but at the same against Florida State. They looked better last week, obviously, but if they can get a Power 4 Big Ten win today, that's huge, of course, for Alabama and their current head coach, who's trying to, convince people that he could still do this job nonetheless. But Wisconsin, man, they have a lot to prove here today, and they have a lot. They could change the narrative about their program and Luke Fickell if they can come away with the win at Alabama coming up this afternoon. Michigan and Central Michigan, 27.5-point line there. Michigan favored over Central Michigan. Auburn, South Alabama, Louisiana, and Missouri will kick off later at 1 o'clock on ESPN and the SEC network, of course. Penn State, their very weak schedule. Okay, it's been a weak schedule. And a lot of people are ripping Indiana for their weak schedule moving forward. Go type in Penn State and their future schedule. They don't challenge themselves in the non-con at all. And I've said before, I don't know how I feel about that. I understand the business side. It makes sense. If you're Penn State, you got to play Ohio State and Oregon and Michigan. And you know what I mean? Like, you're already USC. There's legitimate programs in the Big Ten that you're going to be running into. You beat those teams. Your resume speaks for itself. Why risk putting on a tougher opponent that can negate one of those wins or vice versa? I get it. But at the same time, Ohio State, to their credit, Texas series, Alabama, Georgia, the Notre Dame series, Oregon before they even got in the Big Ten. They have Oklahoma, that series. They've never shied away from the biggest programs in the country, putting them on their non-conference schedule. The matchup I'm most excited for here today, SEC Showdown. Obviously, 3:30 the kickoff on ABC. Georgia is a 3.5-point favorite as they are on the road at number 15, Tennessee. 2 unbeaten teams, SEC play coming up later on this afternoon. UTEP The Miners are going to be on the road at number 7, Texas, Arch Manning and company. And then how about the CW network really benefiting here? The CW, with their ACC package. The CW network gets a top 25 showdown with the number 5 Miami Hurricanes welcoming in South Florida. South Florida has 2 top 25 wins on the season. They really haven't got a lot of love from the AP voters, of course. They beat top 25 Boise 34-7 in week 1. They upset Florida last week 18-16. At the time, Florida was the number 13 team in the country. So as we sit here right now, South Florida, has a chance to start out 3-0 with 3 straight wins over top 25 teams. I'm really looking forward to see what South Florida could do. But Miami, they have a chance, too, with their big win that they've had to start the season with the win against Notre Dame, 27-24 back in week 1. They blew out Bethune-Cookman in week 2 and have a chance to get their second top 25 win in 3 weeks to start the season. So it's a big opportunity for the Hurricanes as well. Illinois, they blew out Duke last week. They're 2-0 on the season. They're number 9 in the country, and they welcome in Western Michigan. Illinois is a 27.5-point favorite in that showdown right there. 7:30 tonight, Florida unranked at LSU. Big rivalry game right there. LSU is a 6.5-point favorite. Notre Dame, they're 0-1 on the season, trying to find a way to get off the mat. They have Texas A&M in town tonight. That's a 7:30 kickoff on NBC and Peacock. So there you go. And then, of course, the Ohio State Buckeyes, 28.5-point favorites with the Ohio Bobcats in town, and we'll have that coming up for you right here on 1410 ESPN Radio and 92.9 Jack FM. Well, everybody, thank you. We like to just touch base each and every week right before, this college football slate of games kicks off for the day. Later on tonight, Ohio State, Ohio, 92.9 Jack FM, 1410 ESPN Radio. Coverage begins at 5:30. And we'll walk you right up to kickoff at 7 o'clock. At Submarine House, by the way, if you want a chance to meet College Football Hall of Famer Keith Byers, College Football Hall of Famer Keith Byers and Hot 102.9's Ryan Drake, they are going to be live at Submarine House in Beaver Creek. If you want a chance to meet the College Football Hall of Famer, the former Buckeye great, you can meet him at Submarine House in Beaver Creek. He'll be there from 5:30 through kickoff. So make sure you head on out to Submarine House in Beaver Creek to watch the Buckeyes tonight and to meet one of the Buckeye greats, Keith Byers. So make sure you go and check that out. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. That wraps it up for us this week. And until, not next week because the Buckeyes are on a bye week, but until the 2 weeks from now, when Ohio State hits the road for their first road game of the season to take on Washington, we'll join you that morning at 11 a.m. as well. Until 2 weeks from now, this has been our Buckeye pregame preview as the Buckeyes get ready to take on Ohio. The Bobcats out of the MAC later on this evening. Thank you for tuning in.